of supporting vulnerable communities.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. As Franciscans, we draw on Catholic social teaching, particularly Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si, to address the climate crisis. And therefore, Laudato Si provides us also with guidance in addressing non-economic loss and damage caused by climate change by emphasizing the intrinsic value of our creation and the profound connection between human and environmental well-being. Non-economic loss and damages by climate crisis deeply impacts on sacred bonds we share with the natural world and our ethical duty to protect it. The richness of creation diminishes, disturbing ecological balance and impacting indigenous communities whose identities are closely tied to the surroundings. Climate change disrupts cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and spiritual practices, leaving many communities disconnected from their sacred territories. The psychological impacts are profound. As familiar natural spaces degrade, people experience anxiety and grief, underscoring our interconnectedness with the planet. For those facing displacement, such as Iceland, communities threatened by rising seas, the losses are more tangible and imitate severing ties to ancestral lands and challenge the right to stable home. Climate change also threatens sacred sites central to many faiths, erasing connections to places of spiritual importance. These impacts point to a broader ethical challenge. Faith traditions call upon us to care for creation and uphold justice for future generations. Each year, human rights defenders and environmental defenders are murdered for daring to resist environmental exploitation around the world. Global Witness documented that 196 defenders were murdered in 2023 for exercising their right to protect their lands and environment. The actual number is likely higher. This brings the total of murder over 2,000 worldwide since Global Witness began reporting this data in 2012. Global Witness estimates the total to be 2,106 murders. Beyond these immediate impacts, climate change also raises deeper questions about our ethical and moral responsibilities as stewards of the planet. Many religions and cultural traditions call upon humanity care for creation, urging us to protect the earth for future generations. The exploitation and destruction of ecosystems for short-term economic gain is not only an environmental issue, but a moral failure, one that compromises the health of the planet for those who will come after us. This intergenerational injustice jeopardizes the ability of future generations to meet their needs, practice their traditions, and live in harmony. The encyclical calls for inclusive dialogue, especially involving indigenous and vulnerable communities, custodians of essential ecological and cultural knowledge. This inclusive approach promotes holistic, culturally sensitive responses that support community resilience and identity. Laudato Si advocates for compassionate ethical framework in climate negotiations, emphasize solidarity and justice. Valuing spiritual and cultural dimensions inspire strategies that address full scope of loss damage. At COP29, discussions of new climate finance goal are expected to address how the Loss and Damage Fund can support those impacted by climate change, defining and address non-economical loss and damage effectively. Countries most responsible for emissions must take greater responsibility to aid those most affected. Our advocacy aligns with our faith-based organizations raising awareness of the non-economic loss and damages at the UN. With close ties to affected community, faith-based groups play a unique role in highlighting how insufficient finance affects through coalitions efforts we contribute to a deeper understanding of climate induced non-economic losses. To conclude, I would like to highlight related issues of no less importance to our theme. As Franciscans, following the COP process and reality of the communities in vulnerable situations that we serve, we warn against false solutions that are promoted as climate action, but that are ultimately worsen the crisis. We have the non-economic losses and damages from the false solutions, just like what we talk about the energy transitions. The energy transition agenda that was imposed from North Global to the South Global, it's a decision to maintain standards of life in that part of the world at the expenses of the countries of the South, and the perpetuation of the new colonial history that means more extraction, more mining. These solutions mask the imposition of great sacrifice and impacts on regions of the world that have contributed least to climate change, but that hold vital common goods which are exploited in these so-called green solutions. Without structural changes, technology alone cannot solve the climate crisis and will lead to even greater losses and damages. A real response requires a structural transformation. We don't want transit from one place to another. We don't want transition. We want transformation, a new way of living. Pope Francis in the encyclical talks about happy sobriety. It doesn't mean to have less, but to have with more intensity. It's the way we live and figuring different perspectives for our lives. So the invitation is why we struggle for the funds, for the loss and damages, non-economic loss and damages that are necessary, not as a compensation, but for justice. But we need to struggle for a different approach regarding to treat the environment and the vital forces of nature as financial assets, as we have when we trade photosynthesis through carbon credits, but also when we exploit more minerals, destroying the environment, and leave the burns in different countries to support the standard of life that is unsustainable. A real responsible, then, faith-based communities inspired by our faces must take a prophetic stance against false solutions and advocate for true systematic change to overcome the sustainable model that has led to the crisis. Instead of seeing the planet as a resource, we should consider it a source of life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Rodrigo, for highlighting all these forces solutions to climate change impacts. In fact, clean energy is part of these false solutions, and we really need to think about on renewable energy instead of other, including these false solutions. And as you said, also losses and damages are affecting the whole spectrum of human rights. So I think it's really important to know from the communities affected how this is the broader aspect of this. So we invited Candice Danilang, and Candice Danilang is a young student from the Philippines taking up Bachelor of Science in Environmental Planning at Miriam College in Manila. As a young scientist, she hosted in 2023 the session Zero Waste as Action and Local Movement Carbon Footprint Calculation. During the Climate Action Week in Philippines. She is also the internal vice president of Miriam Environmental Planning Organization. exemplifying perseverance in both academic and community service. Her commitment to climate justice led her to participate in the Laudato Si Asia Workshop. So thank you so much, Miriam, for being with us. Candice for being with us, sorry. And we would like to ask you if you can share how recent climate events in the Philippines, like the heat waves, floods, or typhoons, have impacted your availability to attend school and pursue your education. How have these challenges affected your right to education on a personal level? Welcome. You want to speak here?
Good morning, everyone. As many of you know, the Philippines is one of the most disaster-prone, stricken countries in the world, and our country lies in the typhoon belt, which means that we're regularly hit by some of the most strongest storms in the planet, and 20 typhoons enter the Philippine area of responsibility each year, with around 5 to 7 of them making landfall. So this year alone, since classes started in September, we've already experienced at least three severe typhoons that led to multiple delays or multiple days of class suspensions. And from what I got from my family in the Philippines right now, there's another incoming storm again. So with this in mind, each time a typhoon hits, our schools are forced to close, our schedules are put on hold, and we lose precious time that could be used for learning. The Department of Education in the Philippines reports that during the 2022 to the 2023 school year, around 20 days of our classes were canceled nationwide due to the weather-related events, which affects millions of students like me. And just this year, the Philippines has seen some of the hottest temperatures on record, with cities like Metro Manila, where I came from, hitting temperatures as high as 37 degrees Celsius in April. So when I think about these statistics, I don't think about this as just numbers. For me, each missed day of school in our education is a missed day in our future. We have a hard time to catch up because of these suspensions. These disruptions pile up, and this is becoming a reality for a lot of students. And even if we have online resources, like college students like myself, it's easy for us to manage it, but not so easy for those in the grade school and high school departments. These children, it's not really easy to replace face-to-face interactions and guidance from teachers. And sometimes it almost feels like we're in a never-ending cycle where we have to recover from one disruption and then only to be hit by another. So beyond just the immediate impacts of these suspensions, I also want to emphasize that there's a larger question about our long-time learning. So research suggests that frequent school disruptions can leave a lasting impact on our educational outcomes, which means that it reduces our overall academic performances and affects our future opportunities. Because of these climate-related disasters, it is sad to say also that us among students, we're also facing the challenges in balancing school, family responsibilities, and for some of us, part-time jobs. It affects the way we think. We have climate anxiety because of this, so it really threatens our future and our present. Even for younger kids, each typhoon brings trauma, disruption, and uncertainty. They may not be able to understand why their lives are disrupted or interrupted always, why they can't go to school because of these weather events, or why they have to start over and over again after each storm. So this disruption can impact our concentration, our security, and it disrupts our foundation for learning. So the loss of this education isn't just an economic issue, it's a human one. And these kinds of losses, the emotional toll it takes on students is big. So the cycle of typhoon disruption, the damage, recovery, and then another storm cannot be allowed to continue unchecked, or our entire country's future will suffer. So I'd like to leave with you some questions that I hope will resonate. So how can we as a society ensure that us students, our right to education is being protected despite these weather disasters? What can be done to support younger students who face even more challenges in keeping up with their education? And what role can each of us play in a future where education is not the mercy or is not in the mercy of climate events? So these questions, I know that they don't have easy answers, but they're worth thinking about. And these aren't just questions for policymakers, they're questions for all of us. Because education is a right for everyone, and it's not a privilege we can afford to lose because of the climate inaction. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Candice, for your for sharing with us what is happening in the Philippines, and also for highlighting the mental health of the young adults. And I think with many face actors, we did a research that when young adults told us that eco-anxiety is something that we really need to include in these negotiations. How can we capture all these losses, when we are talking about money, but it's more than that, So also we have here our colleague, Ramon Pich Madruga. He is one of the 3 vice chair of the IPCC. So during the 6th assessment cycle, he was the vice chair of the working group 3, and he has been the director of the Center for World Economy Studies in Cuba since 2013, where he has been a researcher since 1986 and was a deputy director from 1999 to 2013. Ramon Pich, as a vice chair of the IPCC, thank you so much for having the time to be with us. And we would like also to ask you, how can we capture all these losses that is not easily quantified? So how can the IPCC help to ensure that these losses are recognized and compensated in a way that truly support the resilience and human rights of the vulnerable communities? The floor is yours, Ramon.
Thank you very much, Elena. It's a pleasure for me to be with you again. I would like to start by thanking the organizers for this opportunity to have this exchange. And with regard to the role of the IPCC in such a debate, I would like to say that the mandate of the IPCC, as you know, is assessment of the relevant scientific and socioeconomic literature associated to climate change, to climate science, and producing, as you also know, this integral assessment on climate change, like the AR6, the 6th assessment report that was concluded last year. At present, is creating conditions in the preparation process for the 7th assessment report. And with regard specifically to this topic of losses and damage, I would like to say that the recent IPCC reports have been assessing the growing literature on losses and damage across sectors and regions, linking with adaptation constraints and limits. This association is very important. Losses and damages in this context are referred broadly to harm from observed impacts and projected risks. And this concept, this topic, as also Elena referred at the very beginning of the event, has gained importance, supported by the robust scientific evidence on anthropogenic climate change, amplifying the frequency, intensity, and duration of climate-related hazards. Losses and damages associated with those residual losses and damages that are felt beyond the adaptation actions imply a sense, of course, of limits to adaptation at a given time and within a spatial context. So this is very important to take into account time and space in which these losses and damage are considered. And also another message from the IPCC recent report is that losses and damages associated with future climate change impacts beyond the limits of limits to adaptation is an area of increasing focus, although yet to be fully developed in terms of methods of assessment. So here we have a gap, the methods for assessing such losses and damages, not only economic losses and damages, but mainly non-economic, as was mentioned by some of the previous speakers. These include, of course, non-economic losses and damages, as well as identifying means to avoid and reduce both economic and not economic losses and damages. In terms of economic losses and damages, including loss of assets, infrastructure, land, etc., and with regard to the non-economic losses and damages, for instance, loss of societal beliefs and values, cultural heritage, biodiversity and ecosystem services. And this is an area also that I would like to highlight because it's closely related to the assessment by the IPCC and also with the assessment by IPBES, that you know is a similar body for biodiversity. And this articulation in the analysis between climate change assessment and biodiversity loss assessment is crucial for understanding many of those non-economic losses and damages. So the connection between these two areas is something that should be further developed in the assessment by both institutions. I would say that there is an area here of potential collaboration and also for much more comprehensive assessment of this very relevant topic. There is, of course, this is another message from the IPCC, AR6, there is an increasing evidence of economic and non-economic losses due to climate extremes. However, assessment on non-economic losses and damages is lacking in many cases and needs more attention. So there is a recognition there that this specific area of non-economic losses and damage needs much more attention in terms of assessment and in terms of the treatment by the system literature. The aggregate losses and damages could be much higher if non-economic values are considered in such assessment. To reduce and avoid loss and damages, there is a need for robust conceptual framework and analysis. So this is still knowledge gaps in that sense, and assessment gaps also in that direction. And with regard, for instance, to the synthesis report of the IPCC, you know that the synthesis report is the closing product of each of the cycles of the IPCC, and some of the key messages there, for instance, refer that human-induced climate change, including more frequent and intense extreme events, has caused widespread adverse impacts and related losses and damages to nature and people. Here you have again this connection between the impact on natural system and also on human system beyond natural climate vulnerability. Some development and adaptation efforts have reduced vulnerability. Across sectors and regions, most vulnerable people, this was already mentioned, and systems are observed to be disproportionately affected, and the rise in weather and climate extremes had led to some irreversible impacts as natural and human systems are pushed beyond their ability to adapt. And it was also assessed that limiting warming to close to 1.5 degrees Celsius would substantially reduce projected losses and damages related to climate change in human and natural systems. And also that adaptation does not prevent all losses and damages. And we need to take this into account. Adaptation is crucial, but does not prevent all losses and damages, even with effective adaptation and before reaching soft and hard limits of such adaptation. Losses and damages are also unequally distributed across systems, regions, and sectors, and are not comprehensively addressed by current financial, governance, and institutional arrangements, particularly in vulnerable developing countries. So these are some of the key messages by the IPCC in the AR6. As I said at the beginning, IPCC is now creating conditions for AR7, for the 7th assessment cycle, and of course the intention is including this as other relevant topics within the assessment of this new report by December this year. Next month, we will have the scoping meeting for the AR7, where the set of selected experts to take part in this event are going to make a proposal for the contents, for the structure of AR7 that is supposed to be approved by February next year by the members of the IPCC, I mean the government's members of the IPCC. So we are in that process, so I would say that this event is crucial, it's very timing in this debate process, and it's, for me, it's very interesting and it's very relevant that you have chosen a topic which is connected to the climate finances. It's a very crucial topic in general, one of the pending issues for a lasting solution with regard to climate change, that you have been choosing this topic for such a debate here in this COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ramon, and also thank you for highlight the interconnectedness between all humans and creatures, interconnectedness of all creatures. I think also you highlighted the biodiversity loss and the climate change impact, how this affects this. We just had the Convention on Biodiversity that also discussed the same, no? How climate impacts are impacted on biodiversity loss. So now, after that, we have time for questions from the audience, for comments. So I would like to open the floor. So just raise your hand. If you have a question for our panelists or you have a comment, please be very concise and briefly, so many of you can have the time to speak. So. Thank you, Atina. Could you introduce yourself very briefly, your name and your organization, please?
Can you hear me now? So thank you very much. I am Budi Cahyono from Franciscan International. My question is for Candice. As a young person, you're now in COP 30, and it's an opportunity for us also to hear from young people on how you're affected by the sudden climate weather impacts events. And what is your expectation, in fact, from the discussions that we have now in COP 30? Especially, there are a lot of discussion regarding the climate finance. What is your expectations from this COP 30?
Thank you, Budi. Can we take more than one question? Maru?
Thank you. My name is Maro and I come from Kenya Evangelical Lutheran Church. I'm joining you with the ACT Alliance delegation. My question goes to Ramon. It's evidenced that there are gaps from the methodologies to ascertain and bring into the limelight the non-economic losses and damages. And now the AR7 is going to meet again with a team of experts consolidating a report that is yet to be published. My question is, what are the measures that this team is putting in place to ensure that the non-economic losses and damages, approaches and aspects are also brought into the IPCC and into the delegation affecting the COPs and all thematic areas?
We'll take three first.
Thank you very much. My name is Lesmore Gibson Ezekiel from the All Africa Conference of Churches. My question is to Rodrigo. Thank you. You have raised vital issues with regards to the false solutions. The two-pronged question I have, one, can you also amplify so that we do not generalize when we talk about the false solutions? What are those in specifics, this false solution that we are naming? We need to name those false solutions. And the second part is you mentioned that we should not be talking about transition, but talk about transformation. What are the proposals that you are making as alternatives that speak to transformation that you are advocating in this scope? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. We now we invite our speakers to answer. So maybe we can start with Candice.
Yes, so thank you for your question. I feel like as a young student, for the first time attending this COP, I've come to a lot of realizations, and especially in the topic of climate finance, I believe that us youth, we really do want to see the transparency on how these finances are being handled, and to make sure that developing countries can see where this is going to be put into. The youth voices matter. That's why we're here. That's why we're observing, we're listening, and to me, this really means that we have to focus on real commitments and actions, and that it has to be pushed through. Thank you.
Thank you, Candice. Could we continue with you, Ramon?
Okay, thank you very much for your question with regard to this. As you said, it is recognized by the IPCC. There are still gaps in the assessment, with regard to the assessment, with regard to the frameworks for the analysis and so on. And what are the instruments or the way to ensure that it is going to be properly included in the next assessment? What I would say that. Of course, this is a starting process. We now are in the starting process of the AR7, and for me, it's crucial the way in which, for instance, in this author selection process for each of the working groups, in the author selection process for each of the working groups, it is crucial to have people, to have experts on these topics included. And also identify as much as possible local and regional literature, not only literature in English, but also non-English literature and local literature that could be used, of course, rigorous as to be assessed by the IPCC, but the IPCC have a protocol to include such literature if this fulfill certain parameters, but in my view it's crucial to have a well-balanced and well-represented set of authors for these topics to be properly taken care of and included as part of the assessment. In any case, as I said at the beginning of my intervention, this topic is growing in importance, taking into account the way in which he has been included also in the negotiation process and existing gaps, as has been said, for instance, with regard to the non-economic losses and damages and so on. So for me, I could say that each of you and each of us are part of this process, taking into account that the IPCC is not only the government as members of the IPCC, which is an intergovernmental process, but many or some of your organizations are observers to the IPCC. They have a voice there, and this is also another way of contributing in this awareness process, which is crucial in this next assessment cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon. Rodrigo, it's your turn.
Thank you for the question. I think we need to start from some years ago when in the process of copy we start to talk about adaptation and not to combat the climate change. And then to adapt to what? To adapt to the system that caused this. If we go back, remember 2012, Rio Plus 20, and even before 2007 in Germany, the G7, when they met and they start to calculate the losses of how can we measure the losses of the environment, the environmental losses. Then they create the TEEB, the economical environmental losses of biodiversity, and then they invented that the vital forces of life, the fluxes of life, they are services of the nature. The nature makes services, and that made possible the carbon credit issue. So this is a mentality that came out now for to solve the impacts or to adapt to the impacts of climate change. They put energy because of the decarbonization. We agree. This is true. But if the discussion was different, which kind of system, which kind of society we want to live, energy would be one point, not that point. And the adaptation put the mining sector at the top of the discussions. And then you see, since 2008, all the acts in Europe, the European Union, it's very interesting to see what they call critical minerals. The criticability of the critical minerals are regarding to the standards of minerals and the raw materials they want. Just to see the last one at the Act of Raw Materials of the EU and the alliances they have. And then you put together with the whole change of the economy, with the global gateway, the connectivity ideology, Europe connected. It's a huge competition. Who is going to control the supply chains of raw materials? And then you have US, you have Japan, China, and Europe competing among themselves. And who is going to take the burn? The global south. Destruction is going to be. It's a new colonial approach. Tell me, where is sustainable mining? Tell me, where is just transition? What means justice? I agree. The labor movement, the workers' movement, the unions, they have a history on telling us what is just transition. But when you talk now about just transitions, it's destroying communities, it's destroying sacred places, it's destroying the nature of itself. And then we need to think nature as a common good, but not only for us. So it's very complicated. I know everybody repeat this, and I go for some proposals. But it's very complex to say that those who caused the climate crisis have the solution. And sometimes in the IPCC documents, they talk about minerals. I don't know if this is the subject. The subject is to reflect what's happening. But the solution should be in the hands of society, in the hands of the population. That's why in Latin America, we talk a lot about post-extractive economy. Post-extractive economy doesn't mean we're not going to extract. Everything here comes from somehow from extraction. We're talking about huge extraction. We're talking about financial system imposing the rhythms of extraction. But we talk about reduce this process for a more comprehensive, and then territories free from mining. Territories free from mining is to empower the populations in the territories. We face distant markets. We face, are we going to find a solution if we maintain the system of, we talk about food security. What about food What about territory sovereignty? So I think it's It's a different approach. And then when we see in Africa, when we see some places in Asia, but also in Latin America, the lobby of the corporations coming to the ground and telling to the people, look, your forest, planted forest or natural forest, we calculated. Then we will keep the carbon. All right? We're going to pay for you. It's the capital. Capitalism is very interesting. They create another property title. We had the property title of the land. Now we have the property title of what? The, the of the forest, which is blocked, but from the carbon, tons of carbon that you keep there. This is another title. And with this title, it's cynical. I negotiate this title, and then the emissions in my country that I can't afford anymore because of the promises we do in here, in COP, you emit less, okay, you give me some, and I'll keep emitting here. And this is the idea. Ethically talking about the services of the environment, it's ethically a disaster because nature is a source of life. So I think we have a challenge in the dialogue. It's to force. That's what we're facing towards a more comprehensive participation of the populations in the process. We hope next year in COP30 in Brazil, with the People's Summit, we're going to have more power for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. And we also have a lot of hopes for Brazil. But I think something that you said at the end, that we are looking for many solutions, but we don't want to look for the root of the causes of these problems. So we have time for another round of questions or comments. Yes?
Thank you so much for those insightful ideas. I think they are quite appreciated. My name is Philip Kilonzo from the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, and the discussion is quite spot on. I want to take you to the practice part of it, and I'm looking at faith actors as first respondents, particularly in situations where losses and damages hit communities. And my quick ask is, one, faith actors at the forefront in terms of quantifying those losses and damages that do occur. And number two, how are they iteratively connecting with the IPCC process to ensure that the reporting is holistic and influential? Thanks.
Hello, and thank you so much for this panel. It's really valuable. I'm Sarah Hautzinger, here with Green Faith International, and also as an anthropologist and researcher. And so my question goes mostly, I think, to Rodrigo and Ramon in terms of actually the call. I'm sorry, it's more to Ramon. Your call for more research and assessment about non-economic costs. And it follows with my colleague's question. What is the strategy once we have that kind of material better documented in terms of non-economic losses? Is it through human rights violations that we try to exert pressure? What do we do with that material once we have it compiled?
Hi, many thanks for your very insightful comments. My name is Lawrence, working with Dominicans for Justice and Peace. My question would go to Candice. So you've given your thoughts about your expectation at the COP. I would like to know more about your expectation from the Filipino government. What actions do you expect from them to take in terms of addressing the non-economic impact of loss and damage, and especially the right to education? Thanks.
Thank you. Maybe now we can start from Ramon.
Thank you very much. Well, the first question or comment has to do already, as was already said. Yes, of course, the intention of the IPCC and the mandate, of course, is to produce assessments which are supposed to be comprehensive and representative and balanced. And this is, as I said, that depends to a great extent on the set of authors, of the balance in the set of authors selected for this process. And also during the process, and this is connection to your question also, there are different steps, different channels that could be used to canalize this existing literature. Not only the connection with the authors, it is important to identify, it is public, which are the authors that would be selected to work in the different chapters. Also, each of the regions has bureau members which are associated, IPCC bureau members which are associated to the different regions, and this is also another channel. And there are regional expert meetings and workshops by the IPCC where the intention is exactly to try to capture as many as possible this existing literature at the local and regional level through those meetings, and to include, to the extent possible, their main messages in the proceedings of those experts, which are inputs for the assessment as such. So these are more or less some of the channels, and of course with the intention of having at the end a holistic and comprehensive result. But for so doing, we need to be active. Let's say, when I say we, I refer not only to the governments but also to the organizations in making nominations for the different working teams of the IPCC. In many cases, unfortunately, the amount of nominees from the developing countries is not really representative of the amount of problems and the calibration of the problems that we have in the global south, and this of course is in detriment of their participation in the process. So the participation of course I fully understand. I suffer myself in that sense, that for many developing countries experts, they have many other commitments in addition to being working for the IPCC, and the restrictions, both financial, technological, and so on, are much more are considerable in many cases. But anyway, we need to be present there, and the message is to try to participate also from the upside in the process by having inputs in those directions that I mentioned before.
Thank you, Ramon. Maybe Candice, could you?
So actually, I really do hope that our leaders and government in the Philippines prioritize climate education, to include it in our curriculum, because I feel like, especially for the lower and secondary departments, they need to know what is happening. They need to understand more than just the basic terms of what climate change is or science. They need to be informed, they need to be educated, they should know how to manage if ever these disasters impacts us. They're well prepared for it. And also, I think it's really important that as young as they are now, they could be advocates for climate as well. So I feel like our government really do have to prioritize this and take it into action, to include climate education, because again, this is our future, this is our right to learn. And also, we really have to take the next step and focus on what really matters the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Candice. Maybe, Brother Rodrigo, would you like to touch in the question of our first, the question of our colleague?
Well, I think we all agree that we are facing a big challenge, and this challenge asks us to for more dialogue, for more understanding, and try to search in the communities. I think the responses need to come from the ground. Of course, there are the perspective of the science, but to rely only, because we know nowadays much more science. Before, technology was at the service of science. Many times now, with the technology, is ahead of the science. We rely on the solutions that come from technology, not what we can do in terms of doing technologies to change. But technologies, they are not sufficient for changing because it has to do with, with the sense of our life and who we are. And in this perspective, I think we as faith-based organizations, we have something to say in terms of the, of the challenge. And just to think that if my perspective is different, that let's go to indigenous communities. When I see nature with intrinsic value, when I would do assessments, when I would do in the ground licensing for some projects, from some development, a tree will be considered completely different than we normally think from our perspective. So I think there is a strong process that we need to build in terms of dialoguing. But one thing is true. Only the finance of climate will not be the solution. It will be worse because then it will be in the hands of the investors.
We were talking yesterday that beyond numbers, no, it's not only numbers, but it's also quality, transparency, and also accountability. So two more questions, and then I will ask our speakers for the final remarks. Any other question for our speakers? I will take advantage of my role of moderator, and I will ask one question because we know that during the COPs, governments also parties are taking into account the report of the IPCC. No, so and many of the government representatives are also taking this for climate policies. So I would like to ask Ramon, because faith-based organizations most of the time are at the front line of the impacts of climate change. Most of the faith communities are the communities affected for climate change. So we have a lot of information that could be really, really relevant. But sometimes when we discuss with the government at the local level, we cannot influence too much, no? So we are also looking for other stakeholders where we can send this information and as a global level highlight that this is happening here, no? So how in your view, how can faith organizations, faith communities can inform the report of the IPCC?
Yes, I would say that the response to this question is more or less related to the response that I already gave, and has to do, of course, it is quite important to be aware of the structure of the different group of the IPCC. As I said before, in December we will have a proposal for that, and by February next year the structure of the whole report would be approved. Familiarizing with this structure is crucial to see what are the points through which we can canalize many of our concerns and topics and so on. And as also I said before in responding to her question, there are different mechanisms. One of them is the connection with the authors. Would be selected authors from the different regions. The intention is to have a well-balanced team, but knowing the authors, this is a way of trying to, the authors are the ones that are supposed to identify and assess local and the existing literature by the different organizations and also different author regions, local communities and so on, in addition to the peer review literature. So this is another way, and there is another one which is connected to the previous way, which is the expert meeting and workshops of the IPCC, which objective is specifically to identify additional literature and capture this literature in the proceedings that are also input for the whole process. Rodrigo mentioned different literature, which is important too. For instance, this, let's say, alternative way of thinking and this kind of literature is crucial also to have it in hand by the author team, because the mandate of the IPCC, when there is a polemic issue, is not to say this is the one, to say that these are the different views. When there is a range of views with regard of a specific topic, the mandate for the IPCC is to assess the whole range of point of view and to capture this in a representative way. But for so doing, this literature should be in hand by the authors that are the ones that are going to assess the different topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon. The last, okay, the last two questions, and then I will give the floor for our speakers to the final statements.
Yeah, thank you. My question is to Ramon. Clearly, I hear the politicization and commercialization of data. We kept talking about literatures and here. And in your presentation, you mentioned the issue of now we see non-economic impact being given a little attention. For all these years, the IPCC is focusing on either economic, political data. Would you want to share with us? We are privileged to have you here. What has been the politics that the IPCC paid no attention on non-economic impact of loss and damage? What was the politics? And how do we, as faith leaders, step in from even the grassroots in terms of harvesting the experiences of the people into what you would utilize as scientific data that will inform the IPCC report?
The last question.
Thank you so much. First of all, I apologize because it's a little late, but I see a lot of energy here, talking, and I'm really, really, how you call it, interested in this. I'm with the International Network for Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. We're working very closely also with Franciscans Internationals and some others. And please disregard my question if you see like it's not that relevant, because this is going to be a little technical, perhaps specifically on the COP29 itself, because I would say that it could be fair to say some communities or many would think that this process may not be that relevant with the issues that's really happening on the ground, because it's something we have been hearing a lot from a lot of indigenous communities, that because of how the process, the outcome of COP after COP for the last 32 years, or more even, if we talk about other processes. My question is, of course, non-economic loss and damage hasn't been really having a place in this conversation, in this COP, or, because, again, it doesn't bring profits. And I think that, I guess many of us agree that here, aside from talking about climate change, or more so, a lot of governments are talking about business, or talking about business deals, or talking about more extractions, I would say, rather than that. And then, yesterday there was this pledge, the only pledge for the loss and damage fund, that is like only from one country, and then we know that it's a fear. Yes, this is something that I want to hear how you feel about it, what you think about it. Of course, financing is also one part of it, but more so, my question fundamentally is that how much faith do we have in this process, and if there are other processes that we want to really influence, how do we influence them, and what are those other processes? Of course, I've heard IPCC, this and that, but also on the ground, like how much the movements, on the ground, the grassroots movement should also, I don't know, questioning the whole system of this UNFCCC, or what is it? I'm just, all of this, if you think that this is something that is not you're not in in the place to answer or whatnot. Forget about the question. I just want to know our very, very reflection on this. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. So maybe Ramon, I can give you the floor. And then Rodrigo, would you like to address?
Yes, well, first of all, I would like to say that in the message that I refer at the beginning of during my presentation, I refer that the IPCC attaches importance both to the different kind of impacts, not only economic but also non-economic impact. Of course, at the same time, it was said that there is a gap in terms of the existing literature with regard to non-economic kind of impact. There is a gap there in the literature, and the IPCC, the mandate is to assess the literature, and my call is to try to help in identifying social literature and to, in many cases, to produce such kind of literature. At the moment, as I said, IPBES, with regard to biodiversity, has a conceptual framework that assess within, as part of this conceptual framework, the issue of the value of biodiversity with a huge range of possibility, including economic, but also many non-economic and intrinsic value, let's say, of biodiversity, among others. And this offer this range, this wide range of possibility. In the case of the IPCC, the intention is to capture as much as possible these non-economic impacts also as part of the assessment, but it's crucial to have the literature to be assessed in this sense. And part of this literature is local literature. It's produced regionally, it's produced locally. Probably it is in non-English languages. And our call would be not only for the authors, but also for those contributing to the author team to help in identifying this literature, because at the end, the report would be much more balanced if social literature is taken care of by the working team. So my call would be in the sense of being proactive, not only in reading the IPCC reports once they are produced, but in co-producing. And it means, as you said, try to identify which are the points in time in which the compiled literature, the existing literature, could be put in the hands of the authors from the different regions. This is a public list of authors, and you can be connected to them through your organizations, but also, let's say, personally through your institution and network of institutions, because I fully agree with you. At the end, we need a report in which we feel and we have a ownership sense, and it can happen if really we feel ourselves represented there, directly or indirectly through this literature. But for so doing, we need the literature, because it's the only way that IPCC can work, is assessing the existing literature.
Thank you, Ramon. Rodrigo?
Yes. Well, it's a complex question you did, but I think one issue, when you talk about non-economic loss and damages, we should think, first of all, this mechanism and the fund can't be considered as a compensation. There's no way to compensate who died, psychological impacts, the beliefs, the way I have to change, the way I think. So, but as understanding how broad are the impacts. So it's an issue of justice to make accountable government and corporations from what they do. I think in this perspective is acceptable. Otherwise, we damage, we pay. It's not a fine. Some should go to jail. It doesn't happen. If we see the material impacts, if you see, you talk about the two big criminal disasters, no, that happened in Brazil with the collapse of the dams. 272 families, people died in the last one. The first one, 20. It was 20, and nothing. Everything is treated in agreements, and it's extremely unfair when you put who perpetrate the crime, in front of who submitted the crime, who was affected. And then we're going to make an agreement, and the responsibility will be both responsible for the solution. And of course, it's impossible to compete with the power of the corporation. So I think this is first. The second, it's to start the thinking. We need to start a strong dialogue among us, society, to understand what's happening. As I was talking before, who decided that the solution to adapt to the climate change, energy is the big issue? What's behind this? The configuration of the capitalism. If we discuss on a more profound, which are the steps that humankind, which are the steps that societies need to do to live in a different system that we can, and then, as I was saying, energy will be faced. But it's not the topic. When we see here, but even the other COPs, it's a technological fair. Sailing products. So I think this is a loss and damage for the society. We don't think anymore as which is the capacity of ourselves to overcome situations. But we have this and these products. We have this and that. And then the narratives come, just like the clean energy. But to capture, to storage, and to distribute this energy, there's going to be tons and tons of minerals and extraction. So the possibility to think differently and to dialogue, because we are not the same in this discussion. Lots of groups that were with us, they are living in another type of economy, the so-called green economy solutions, and the issue is more deep. So I think we need to commit among us in the different networks and different relations that we have in the society. I start with a strong dialogue to see which kind of life we want to live in this world.
Thank you, Rodrigo. We are coming to the end of this event, so I would like to provide. I will give you the floor for the final remarks. Maybe one, no more than 2 minutes. Candice, would you like to start?
So I just want to say that now is the time for governments, for the education system to really prioritize students and their mental well-being, because right now we know that the climate change, this thing is happening, it's worsening, and the people who are involved in this, the students who are experiencing tragic measures of having to cope and having to think about their futures. What about what will happen to them in the future? So right now it's really important to equip, to take use of this time to prioritize the students and our futures. So I urge everyone to, if you have, anyone, students, or if you're teaching, let them know that this is the reality of it. But let's not lose hope, because there is still time and we have so much to give as youth in this world and in our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Candice. Rodrigo, could you, your final remarks?
I would say, well, if I was in Latin America, it would be much easier for me to say, and I will say from my perspective, I would look for the indigenous people. I would look to the black people that were uprooted from Africa to be in slavery. In their world was destroyed, and they survived, and they resist. The culture of resistance can tell us a lot. I would talk about hope from those who are confronting patriarchalism, from those who are involved in the issues of gender. because we have experienced many people lost their world, but they survived. Now it's our time as all together. So let's dialogue.
Thank you. And Ramon?
Yes, first of all, I would like to reiterate my thanking to the organizers and to all of you for your presence during the whole time for this event, for your questions that have been very, very enlightening for me. And I also would say that, as I said before, that we are in the preparation of the seventh cycle. The leadership of this cycle of the IPCC has included explicitly as one of the objectives for this cycle inclusivity, not only with regard to gender, but also with regard to indigenous knowledge, with regard to the local communities' knowledge. And this is in the direction that you are being speaking in terms of having a report at the end that is much more balanced, much more representative. And so I would say that there is a commitment in that direction. There are, at least for the moment, identified 2 expert meetings, one that has to do with gender, but also with other, as I said, indigenous knowledge and local community knowledge, and also with the different forms of knowledge that the IPCC has been recognizing as important as part of the process. So my call, as I said before, is to be co-producers of this report. There is also another instance, which are the review of the different drafts of the IPCC, and there information, literature can be submitted as part of these comments to the existing drafts. So there are many ways of influencing the process of co-producing this report, because at the end what we need is a report that could be relevant not only for governments in the negotiation process, which is of course crucial, but also for other organizations, for students, for the university. It's a kind of synthesis of the science, because the IPCC does not create new science, new knowledge. The IPCC assessed existing literature, but it's very valuable having this compendium of the synthesis, which is a good summary and a good contribution in terms of inputs for all of the decision makers, which are not only the policy makers. The decision makers are all of you at the same time, including the students that will be the policy makers of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ramon, and thank you, our distinguished speakers, to be with us today, and thank you to all of you for this event.